Welcome to today's video, and welcome to the wrap-up of my time in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I've been here a little bit over a month. I think it was 5.5 weeks, and I want to share with you a little bit from the day of entering the country to the day of leaving it, which is tomorrow morning. What happened? What were the things I really liked? Where did I go to? What can I recommend? But also, of course, as always, what are maybe the downsides? What I did not like that much? What are things maybe to keep in mind? Well, if you're new here on the channel, my name is Dan, and for the past 5 years I've been on and off traveling and living in different countries. You could call it the perpetual travel lifestyle, if you will. And here on the channel I document my life around that, coming to different countries, seeing what is up on the ground, what type of different opportunities are there, is the place nice to travel, and always keeping your eyes open for kind of like the fact that I realized a few years ago that most of the countries you really want to visit and go to are countries that you maybe don't know that much about yet, that you maybe have never even heard of. Everyone knows the established big brands of travel, go to Europe, go to this, go to there, but there's so much more to see, and those are also in many ways the countries that I like to go to that are not quite yet on the radar for that many people. And I would say Bosnia and Herzegovina is really one of those places. And so I made my way up from Albania with a bus through Montenegro for a few days, and we are arriving in the city of Sarajevo. It's a very interesting city. It's like a big mix of cultures. There's this one spot in the city, it says East meets West. And what it pretty much stands for is, like, if you look on one side and you see kind of like a bit of an Eastern city, it reminds you a little bit maybe of Istanbul. You see like a bit of a marketplace, a mosque. You turn around, it looks like you're in Austria. You know, you have a big church, and this is pretty much what the city historically is in many ways. And it has really beautiful corners. Like, some parts could even compete maybe with a major European capital. Some people say it has a little bit the charm of Prague. In the middle of the city, you have kind of like also a few more bigger buildings. You have also a bit of a more of a modern side, a very big mall, so all the major conveniences are taken care of. It really has the comfort of a bigger city, not a big city, but it has all the major conveniences you might want. You know, nice gym, big malls, all the major chains and so on, if that's something you're, let's say, want to have the convenience of. But at the same time, on the mountains, on the hills, you have nice little houses, so that I kind of like from the, let's say, originality perspective. There's many big cities that just feel way too similar, so that city also like aesthetically looks really different. In my first video, I addressed a little bit, well, pretty much the war that happened here in the country roughly 30 years ago. Have a lot of holes on the houses. Like, some houses are really broken down and you have huge holes on them. In the city center, not that much, but the holes you see pretty much all over Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm going to talk about that later again. So that's definitely something you're going to see. And before we're going to get into all the different cities that I visited, first of all, right now I am in the city. I'm going to be flying out tomorrow morning from the Tuzla airport. I decided to stay for a few days at this hotel. It's called Vertigos. It's a brand new hotel, like seriously super comfy, really taking the time to wind out a little bit, to just relax a little bit at the same time getting some work. So really a good spot if you're going to be flying out of Tuzla or just want to stay for a few days. I'm going to show you a few shots also from the outside. Really cool looking place. And in terms of the location, I walked around a little bit, haven't seen a better place. It's like right in front of the old town, so also to the city center you can go. I've also been getting a COVID test, like, so all of that is really possible from Tuzla. So if you're going to be flying in or out, this is kind of like my base here for the past Bosnia and Herzegovina, definitely a hidden gem in terms of nature. So from Sarajevo, I made my way into the first stop of Mostar. We rented a car, or actually precisely, I got the opportunity to shoot a bit of a movie. I helped these guys a little bit with their marketing content, and at first we got this Volkswagen, got up the mountain into the snow, and then they were like, yo Danny, you got some really cool shots, you know what, we have a different car for you. And that was like a really cool experience overall. Shot a little nice crispy video. We were driving with this Porsche all throughout the city. So that definitely, like, probably a little bit of a biased opinion right now from my side, because I had a really sick time driving around, cruising around, speeding a little bit. I hope no tickets are coming in. Didn't like, in terms of that, is very relaxed. Also police checks. I actually got stopped once, and this guy is like, approaching me in like, the local language. I'm like, oh, hello, how are you? Don't speak, unfortunately. He's like, all good? I'm like, all good. He's like, you can go. So that was all easy. So the city of Mostar, if you're just gonna look at it, picturesque. You have this ancient Ottoman bridge, like medieval architectures, and the side that I was living on was a little bit more local. It looked maybe a little bit rougher, you have the post-communist Yugoslavian buildings, but I really liked the vibe. It was super alive, and like in these times it's a little bit harder to find. So I decided to settle down in Mostar a little bit longer, for 2 weeks. Also been visiting the gym there. So in terms of, let's say, passing by for a few days, I think it's really nice, the old town of Mostar. But even staying there a little bit longer, I think the more residential town also has its charm. They have a huge mall, so again, in terms of staying a little bit longer, has all the major conveniences. So made Mostar my base instead of Sarajevo, because Sarajevo was a little bit more closed off, but I think by now they open everything up. From Mostar, with the car, we made our way into pretty much a road trip in between of Mostar and Neum, which is the little piece of land that Bosnia and Herzegovina has. The little piece of land, it's like maybe, I don't know, a stretch of like a few kilometers, maybe like an hour walk from one side to the other, like a few minute drive, pretty much. And on both sides you have Croatia. And the town looks really nice. In many ways, reminds me of Croatia, reminds me of Montenegro. You have these beautiful buildings with the orange roofs. Just to be on a beach, like what was it, like 22 degrees. Really good time, and especially if you have like a Schengen visa and the times are a little bit more relaxed, then now you can easily close into Croatia if you pass by. So very nice area, but especially the drive there, just stopping by the road, that was really one of those moments where I was like, yep, confirmed, this country blew my expectations completely away, because it's kind of like a nice mix of extremely beautiful nature, mountains. The Balkans really taught me to really appreciate and love mountains. So you have like extreme nice mountainous drive, and then you have this city, like what was it, the city of Počitel, where you have again this medieval architecture that you maybe cannot find in the same way. At least I didn't see it in neighboring countries that much. Post-Yugoslavia neighboring countries, where that was the fact where Bosnia and Herzegovina for me was different from the neighboring countries. It has a really nice mix of different culture and influences. And so that was pretty much the road trip to Neum, then spent a few more days in Mostar. Then I had actually a buddy of mine driving out to pick us up from Mostar to go to the city of Trebinje. And Trebinje, very likely my favorite city. Again, a little bit biased, was just there for a few days, stayed in a nice place, but the city on the weekend was just so alive. Local market, beautiful small old town, and I've heard actually that many people really underestimate the city, and it's a little bit undervisited because it is really in the corner. It's close to bordering Montenegro. It's also just like a 30-minute drive from the city of Dubrovnik in Croatia. So actually kind of like strategically and like not too bad of a location, very accessible. So the city of Trebinje, this was kind of like a little bit the triangle that I did, most of Sarajevo, Trebinje. Super nice, again, the drive there, the nature, the mountains. Absolutely loved it. So we're doing a bit of a stop. So Bakir got this car, shoot like a little bit of a promotional video, right?
Exactly.
So he's behind the wheel, I'll be piloting. There's a nice spot around the corner, so let's see what we can do. So this was kind of like the itinerary, more or less. Then I went back to Sarajevo. Now we are here in Tuzla. So let's say the potentially downsides or things to keep in mind. Again, Sarajevo is restored in many ways, yet definitely has some rough corners. But especially cities like Mostar, cities that are, let's say, not the capital, or however you want to say it, you see a lot of buildings that are just like for 30 years nobody touched it. There's like huge trees growing out of that. You see some buildings where you're like thinking like you definitely don't want to walk under that. So in terms of that, signs from the war, you know, there's just like bullet shots on all of buildings. This is just kind of like the impression that you are gonna have. So my conclusion is, overall, even though the weather didn't really play along, even though they had some lockdowns, overall I found myself to be in some cities that were so extremely alive, had a really good vibe. It has a nice and interesting mix of different cultures that make the country unique. At first I wasn't sure if I want to visit it, if it's just going to be another country that looks very similar to neighboring countries, but actually it doesn't. It looks like it's a nice unique mix, as mentioned before. So even if you have been, let's say, already to Serbia, if you have been already maybe to Albania, that also has a lot of, let's say, medieval Ottoman architecture, it's similar in some way, very different in others, and there was really no place where I was like, oh, yeah, feels exactly the same. Definitely a one-off and unique experience. So Bosnia and Herzegovina definitely exceeded my expectations by far. I can highly recommend for everyone to travel here. In terms of budget, again, in the Balkans as everywhere else, especially if you're in a little bit of a more local town, but even in the mid-center of Sarajevo, very affordable. Definitely you're gonna pay 30 to maybe even 50% less than you would pay like in a Western capital. So in terms of that, also when you take your money, be it working online, be it just taking a vacation for a few weeks, it can take you much further here, like renting Airbnbs for starting at $15, $20, $25 for decent Airbnbs. But of course also that's like kind of like the good thing about Sarajevo. So for me on the schedule, I think it's gonna be a few days visiting the family. I haven't visited them for over half a year. We actually met halfway, met my mom in Ukraine for a week or two, had actually my dad drive out to go on a trip with me through Albania, so definitely keeping in touch, but it's also going to be good to touch down with them a little bit, see my dog who I haven't seen for over half a year. So if you want to follow along generally behind the scenes a little bit, you're welcome to join me on my Instagram. There I share also a little bit of nuggets, what I do, how I do what I do, a little bit some YouTube tips and tricks, and next to that, plans for the next few weeks. Right now I'm heavily looking into Dubai and Egypt. The only thing that might maybe break these plans is it looks really hot, and also in terms of like COVID regulations, does it make sense? Like I would have to take like 3 PCR tests in 2 months. We'll see, but that's what I'm heavily looking at generally on the schedule for the next month. I am heavily looking at Armenia and Georgia as well. So on the channel generally, yes, we're doing travel vlogs, but even more it's like, hey, what countries do offer a little bit more for your money? Dubai is going to be very interesting in terms of a lot of people are moving there, living there long term, starting up their businesses. And so, if you're into, let's say, traveling, perpetually living in different places, living life with a little bit more excitement, a little bit more freedom, this is what we're talking about here. Press the subscribe button, join me on this journey, and we're gonna see each other very soon.